The word a piece of rubbish to the most important meeting of my life. A cracked plastic lid wrapped 3 times in black electrical tape. The world tilted sideways, still carrying the smell of Fiordland mud, and set it down on the boardroom table right next to a 7-figure contract with the Department of Conservation. The lawyer's assistant looked at it. The world tilted sideways, chapped and calloused and stinking of wet manuka. No matter how many times I'd scrubbed that morning, and I could see her trying to work out whether I was taking the piss. I wasn't. The worldly bit of plastic was the only reason any of us were in the room. 190 days. That's how long since I'd let my brother's name light up my phone and just watched it ring out. The world tilted sideways. 190 days since I'd decided that loving Jace and listening to Jace were 2 things that couldn't live in the same body anymore. They'll want to know why, mate. So do I in a way. I'm still working it out. But the beginning is easy enough to find a barbecue on a flat scrap of lawn in Papakura, my brother's boot, the world piece of plastic sailing across the grass like a rugby ball. That was the summer I turned 33. The word then I'd already spent 9 years and most of my savings building something almost nobody in my family believed in. A sound detection rig, the world that Dauphi Rangers could bolt one to a tree every 50 meters instead of one every kilometer. The world listening for the particular crunch and snuffle of a stoat or a ferret getting close to a kiwi nest. Kiwi don't fly. They can't outrun a stoat. All they've got is us hearing the danger before it happens. The world tilted years we haven't been able to afford to listen closely enough. The word I could fix that with parts from an electronics wholesaler in TT Huhu and a soldering iron that overheated if you ran it past 40 minutes. The world tilted site aunties called it Kalen's hobby. My uncles called it that thing with the birds. Jace called it a lot worse. He'd flown down from Auckland that morning still half in his work clothes. The world tilted sideways, top button undone, the kind of tired that comes from closing a big sale rather than doing anything with his hands. Jace sells commercial property. Good at it, ruthless at it, actually. Though he'd call that being realistic. He came straight from the airport to Mum's back lawn, dropped his bag by the deck. By the time he'd cracked his second twy, he'd found me crouched near the fence line, testing a sensor housing against the hose on the mist setting, checking the seals. Still playing with your little bird alarm. He said, not a question. It's not an alarm, it's a... The word don't care what it is, mate. He crouched down next to me, and for one stupid second I thought he might actually look at the wiring. Instead he picked the whole unit up out of my hands, the whirver once like he was checking for a price tag, and lobbed it clean across the lawn. It skittered past the chili bin, bounced off someone's jandal, and came to rest near the letterbox. The world tilted through the plastic housing. Nobody said anything. My cousin Bree laughed. Not cruelly, just the reflex laugh you do when someone louder than you laughs first. And Jace was already laughing loud, delighted with himself. The world tilted sideways. Sorry. He said not sorry at all, but come on. 33 years old and this is what you're doing with your life. Little sensor for a bird nobody's even seen in the wild. The world toad I sold this week. A commercial block in Newmarket. You know what that bird alarm's going to sell? Nothing. It's never going to sell anything because it's a toy. The world till built it in a garage and Dad built his whole future in a garage too. And look how that. He stopped himself, just barely. Took a pull from his beer instead of finishing the sentence. And something moved across his face too fast for anyone else to catch. But I caught it because I'd caught it before dozens of times over dozens of barbecues. Though always right there at the edge of a joke about our father, always swallowed back down before it became a full sentence. The world tilted sideways. I picked up the housing. The crack ran diagonal from the mounting screw down through where the microphone sat, and cold water was already pooling inside from the hose test. I didn't say anything either. The war just found the roll of black electrical tape in my Utes glove box. I always kept one there. The world tilted sideways because things broke around me constantly and nobody else was going to fix them. And I wound it around the crack 3 times tight, the way you'd bandage something that was still bleeding. The world's Cormac's cue to wander over, beer in one hand, the easy grin he'd had since we were 15 and skipping maths together at Papakura High. The word tilled Jace on the shoulder like they were old mates, though truthfully Cormac had never had much time for Jace before that year. Cormac worked in software out in Albany. The world tilts her some start-up doing agritech dashboards, and Jace had always found him a bit soft for his taste. But that afternoon they stood shoulder to shoulder laughing at the same thing, the Werber thinking it was strange, the two of them united over the sight of me picking cracked plastic up off wet grass. Nah, don't laugh at him too hard, Cormac said and crouched down beside me. All warmth, all old friend concern. Show us what you've actually got going on in there, bro. I might know a guy at D who'd take a look. The world tilted sideways. Of course I showed him. He asked the right questions, the ones that sounded like curiosity and felt at the time. The world tilted's real interest anyone in my family had taken since I started this. I even emailed him the schematic that week, the actual guts of the detection algorithm. The world tilted sideways. The $B microphone tell the difference between a stoat's gate and a possum's from 30 meters off in wet bush. I wanted someone technical to check my maths. He said he would. The world tilted sideways. I didn't think about it again for months. I had a prototype to keep alive and a permit application with the Ark in the park sanctuary out in the Wait Kiras. There were every spare hour outside my actual job. I fitted commercial aircon units for a firm in Manukau, decent money. The world tilted sideways. Went into refining a rig that half my family thought was an elaborate way of avoiding a real life. The world I couldn't work out, and what I turned over on long drives out to the ranges more times than I can count, was why Jace cared so much. Plenty of families have a black sheep, a dreamer. The world tilted sideways, someone chasing something that never pans out. Usually the rest of the family just shrugs and lets them get on with it, maybe rolls their eyes at Christmas. Jace didn't shrug. Jace couldn't let it go. The world tilted sideways every single gathering. Without fail, he'd find some way to bring it up, some fresh insult dressed up as tough love, always delivered loud enough for an audience, always aimed to land. Though wasn't disapproval. Disapproval doesn't need witnesses. This was something closer to fear. The world couldn't have told you that at the time. I only knew that a man who supposedly thought my project was beneath noticing sure spent an awful lot of energy noticing it. The world tilted smum about it once, carefully, over tea in her kitchen in Drury while Jace was off doing an open home. She went quiet in a way that wasn't like her, stirred her tea longer than it needed stirring. The world tilted sideways, and said, "Your brother worries more than he lets on, love," and then changed the subject to whether I was eating properly out in the bush. I let it go. The world had a sanctuary trial in 6 weeks and a microphone housing that still leaked in heavy rain, and I didn't have room in my head for anything I couldn't solder. The world tilted sideways so where it sat. The night I loaded the taped-up unit into the back of my ute and drove the 4 hours south toward Fiordland in the dark, windows down, the smell of diesel and wet bush replacing the smell of sausages and beer. My thumb kept tapping against the steering wheel without my telling it to. 3 short, 1 long, 3 short. The world tilted sideways, the rhythm of a South Island robin's call. The sound that meant, somewhere out there, a monitored patch of forest was quiet and a nest was safe. It's a habit I've never been able to shake. The world tilted to rhythm out when my chest goes tight. I did it the whole drive down. I didn't yet know that the crack. The world tilt piece of plastic riding shotgun beside me on the bench seat was about to save an entire colony of birds nobody in my family had ever bothered to ask me about. Or that it would take a betrayal I hadn't seen coming yet to finally drag out the real reason my own brother couldn't stand the sight of it. The call came from a woman named Anahara Ungeta who managed a private sanctuary block behind Manapouri. The world till hectares of regenerating bush her family had fenced off from stoats with their own money because DOC's budget didn't stretch that far south. The wort my rig through a ranger mate who'd seen me testing units out near the Kepler track, and she let me bolt 6 sensors along her boundary line for nothing. The world tildition that if a single one of them failed and a nest got hit, I'd take the whole lot down and never come back. 11 nights in, the word of them caught a stoat's gate 40 meters out from a known nest at 2 in the morning and pinged Anahara's phone loud enough to wake her. The world till she got out there in her dressing gown and gumboots with a torch and an old .22, and she put the stoat down before it ever reached the burrow. 2 chicks survived that would otherwise have been gone by sunrise. She rang me the next morning, still half laughing with disbelief, and said, "The word of plastic just did in one night what I've been trying to do with traps for 6 years." Word like that doesn't stay quiet for long in a small community. Within a fortnight a DO field officer had been out to see it running, and within a month there was talk, real talk, not polite talk, of a trial across 3 larger sanctuaries. The warper tender to follow if the trial held up. I should have felt like I'd won something. For about a week I did. Then Cormac rang me, cheerful as anything. The world and asked if I wanted to grab a pint in Auckland to celebrate his shout. I drove up thinking he meant celebrating for me. Turned out he meant something else entirely. The world took him 3 beers to get to it. The world, so I've been doing a bit of my own tinkering, he said, turning his glass slowly on the coaster, not quite meeting my eye. Took some of what you sent me, just as a base obviously. The were where it's due, mate, and built it out properly. Proper aluminium housing, CNC'd, weatherproof to a standard that'll actually pass a commercial tender. The wording it in front of DOC next month. For a second I thought he was joking. Putting what in front of DOC? The sensor. Same detection logic under the hood. Your maths, honestly it's solid. The world tilted sideways. The core of it just, packaged like something a government department could actually sign off on instead of a science fair project. That's my design, Cormac. The world tilted's open concept, bro. Sound detection for pest incursion, that's not exactly a patent, is it? I just gave it the finish it needed, he said it lightly. The were discussing whose turn it was to buy a round, and when I didn't laugh he leaned back, a little wounded like I was the one being unreasonable. I thought you'd be stoked, honestly. The world tilted a favor. Nobody serious was ever going to buy a thing wrapped in insulation tape, Kalen. I'm just getting it somewhere it can actually do some good. I didn't hit him. The world tilted sideways. I want that on record because for about 4 seconds I genuinely thought about it. What I did instead was go quiet in the way I go quiet when I'm trying not to say something I can't take back. The world tilted sideways. Cormac rid the silence as agreement, clapped me on the shoulder on the way out, and said he'd shout me a coffee once the tender was locked in. The world tilted sideways. 3 weeks later at Mum's for a christening lunch I'd have skipped if I'd known who else would be there. Jace had somehow already heard the whole thing. Cormac's version of it. The world tilted sideways, and he brought it up before I'd even got a plate. Cormac showed me the specs on his new unit. He said loud enough for the whole deck to hear. The beer already in hand though it wasn't even midday. Aluminum casing, proper branding. DOC's actually interested. See, that's what I've been saying all along. It's not the idea that was the problem. The world tilted sideways. It's that you never once thought about how to sell it. It's not his idea, Jace. It's mine. He copied the core detection code straight off a file I sent him to check the maths. The world tilted sideways. Jace said, and I watched him enjoy saying it. Just did what you should have done years ago and made it look like something worth paying for. He turned to the table. To our Uncle Trevor and to Bree and to Mum's neighbor Colleen, gathering an audience the way he always did. The words, this is the bloke who reckons the world owes him a sanctuary contract because he glued some tape on a plastic box. The world his mate actually builds something you could put on a shelf. He stole it. I said again and heard my own voice crack slightly on the word stole, which I hated. The world, 'cause it gave Jace exactly the opening he wanted. There he goes. Everyone's out to get poor Kalen. He shook his head at Trevor like they were sharing a private joke about me. The world tilted sideways. You know what your problem is? You'd rather be the tragic little genius nobody believed in than actually win something. You've been rehearsing this exact victim speech since you were about 19. The worm tried to change the subject, the way she always did, asking if anyone wanted more of the pavlova, and for a moment the table let her. The world tilted sideways and I stood there holding a plate I didn't want with my ears roaring, deciding in real time whether to say the true thing sitting right behind my teeth. The world till it came down to a public fight over who owned the design. DOC would very likely walk away from both of us rather than get tangled in a stush between old school mates. The only real shot at the tender was to keep my head down, refine what Anahara's sanctuary had already proven, and let performance do what arguing never would. It wasn't cowardice. The world tilted sideways, standing on that deck with everyone's eyes half on me and half politely elsewhere, but it wasn't. I just couldn't afford yet to be the man making noise. The nothing to say. Jace pushed because silence from me was its own kind of invitation. That's what I thought. The word to put the plate down on the table, walked to my ute, and drove the 4 hours back to Fjordland with my hands so tight on the wheel my knuckles ached the whole way. The world tilted 3, short 1 long rhythm against the dash at every red light between Manukau and Bombay. Like if I kept the beat going nothing inside me would actually crack. The world tilted 2 months I didn't answer a single call from that number. Jace rang 11 times in the first fortnight. I know because I counted. The world tilted sideways at the screen each time it lit up in my truck's coup folder, letting it ring out. He left voicemails that started off scathing. You can't just go quiet like a sulking teenager, mate. The world tilted sideways. This is exactly the kind of thing, Dad. And then halfway through the sentence he'd stop and the voicemail would just end dead air. The world tilted sideways like he'd caught himself walking towards something he didn't want to say out loud into a phone. The world told myself I didn't care what came after Dad. I told myself that a lot, actually out loud, alone in a truck in the dark on forestry roads with no one to hear me lying. Meanwhile, the Cormac's aluminum unit was 2 weeks from its own doe field trial out at a sanctuary near Milford. The whir heard through Anahara, who'd started ringing me every so often just to see how I was holding up. The world tilted so, which surprised me more than it should have, that his housing had already fogged twice in testing. The condensation pooling behind the microphone grill exactly the spot his fancy CNC seams didn't seal properly. Mine never fogged. Mine had never fogged once in 3 years. The world tilted because I'd learned the hard way, testing in actual Fjordland weather instead of a lab in Albany. The world tilted sideways exactly where water finds its way into a thing that isn't built by someone who's had to walk out into sideways rain at 2 in the morning to fix it themselves. The world didn't say any of that to Jace or to Cormac, or to anyone at the next family gathering, which I also skipped. Word got back to me anyway. Bree texted me a screenshot of the family group chat. The world tilted sideways from Jace that read, sounds like Kalen's gone properly precious. Won't even show up for Nan's birthday now. Hope his little science project's worth losing the whole family over. Underneath it, the world tilted sideways had reacted with the crying laughing emoji. Nobody defended me, nobody ever really had. It was Mum in the end who rang the one call I actually picked up. The world tilted Tuesday evening when I was elbow deep in a housing seal by torchlight outside my rented batch near Tianao. You don't have to come to things you don't want to come to, she said. The world tilted what I expected. But I wish you two would just talk properly for once. Actually talk, not whatever it is you do at barbecues. He's the one who won't stop having a go at me, Mum. The world tilted sideways. She went quiet on her end for long enough that I thought the call had dropped. Then she said, careful, like she was picking her way across wet rocks, your brother's not angry at you, love. The world tilted sideways, frightened of you. Frightened of what happens if you end up. And then she stopped herself exactly the way Jace always did mid-sentence, the words folding back into her throat. The word my place to say more than that. It's his to tell if he ever will. And up what, Mum? Just look after yourself down there. Eat something that isn't out of a tin. And then she was gone. The world tilted sideways, off the phone before I could push, the same way she always managed to be gone right at the exact second a conversation threatened to actually go somewhere. The world tilted sideways. I sat on the tailgate of my ute a long while after that, the cracked housing, patched now with a fresh wrap of tape over the old tape, 3 layers thick by that point. The world tilted sideways like tree rings sitting beside me on the metal, and I ran my thumb along the ridge where the cracks still showed underneath, and I thought about my father, who I barely remembered except as a shape in the kitchen doorway and a smell of sawdust, and who nobody in my family had said more than 6 sentences about in my entire life. The world tilted sideways. I didn't know what Mum meant. I told myself I didn't want to know that I had a field trial to prepare for and a tender to win and no room left over for old family ghosts. The whirls. The same week the trial results came in from Milford. Cormac's unit had failed a second time, worse than the first. Full condensation lockup during a cold front. The wee hours of dead silence from a sensor that was supposed to be listening for exactly the kind of threat that moves fastest in bad weather. Doe didn't cancel the tender. The way just quietly pushed the final decision date forward by 6 weeks and asked, almost as an afterthought, the were Anahara's contact, the one running the tape together unit down near Manapouri, might want to submit something for formal comparison. The world tilted sideways and in the dark outside the batch with that email open on my phone, my thumb already tapping against the screen before I'd even finished reading it. The world tilting that for the first time in 9 years the fight might actually be mine to win on the merits. Right before my phone lit up again with Jace's name, the world till the 12th time that fortnight, and against everything I'd promised myself, I let my thumb hover right over the answer button. I answered. Don't hang up, Jace said. The world tilted sideways before I'd even got a word out, and there was something in his voice I hadn't heard directed at me in years. Not the barbecue voice, not the loud one built for an audience, just tired. I heard about Milford. Cormac's unit failing again. Word travels. He's furious. Reckons DOC's about to hand the whole thing to you on a plate because his housing fogged up twice. A pause. The word that used to mean another insult was loading. Instead, good. I nearly dropped the phone. Sorry? The world tilted sideways, said good Kalen. Christ, you need it in writing. He laughed short and humorless and I heard ice clinking in a glass on his end. The world tilted soush of an empty apartment rather than a crowded lawn. I'm not ringing to have a go. I'm ringing because Mum won't stop texting me asking if we've sorted things out. The world so cause I've had 4 whiskeys and apparently, that's what it takes for me to admit I've been a complete bastard to you for about 15 years. I sat down on the tailgate again, same spot. The world to taped housing still beside me where I'd left it. Why, Jace? Just, actually tell me, why do you hate this thing so much? It's a bird detector. The world tilted. It's not worth what you've spent on it. The silence went on long enough that I thought he'd hung up after all. Then he said very quietly, you don't remember Dad at all, do you? Not really. A bit. His hands. The world tilted sideways. We were 4. I was 13. Old enough to remember the actual thing, not just the smell of him. Another pause, and when he spoke again his voice had gone somewhere I'd never heard it go. The Worlton careful like a man walking across ice he already knew was thin. He sank everything into a private reserve out past Cadia. Every cent of the house money, remortgaged twice. The word even know how bad it got until the bank rang. He was so sure it would work, Kalen. So sure exactly the way you're sure. Habitat restoration. Some funding partner who pulled out at the last minute. And it just collapsed. We lost the house. I remember packing boxes into Nana's garage while Dad sat in the car in the driveway for 2 hours because he couldn't come inside and look at any of us. I didn't know it was that bad. Nobody talks about it because there's nothing good to say. He was gone 18 months later. Officially it was his heart. That wasn't his heart. He said this plainly, no drama in it, which somehow made it land harder than if he'd broken down. I was 17. The went and got a job stacking shelves at Pack Save the same month, and I decided right then that I was never, the world tilted sideways, ever at anything I loved get taken off me because I was too busy chasing a good idea to notice the money running out. And then you grew up and turned into the exact same bloke, the world tilted sideways, obsessed with saving birds nobody's ever going to thank you for, and every single time I watched you pour another paycheck into that thing, all I could see was Dad in the driveway, and I panicked. The world tilted sideways, and instead of saying any of this like a normal person his voice actually caught, something I don't think I'd heard from my brother since we were kids. The why just tried to shame you out of it. The world tilted sideways because it was easier than telling you I was terrified you were going to end up dead before 52. The world tilted sideways and I'd have to bury another one of you the way I helped bury him. I didn't say anything for a while. Past the backs the bush was doing its usual late evening racket. The world tiltilporks calling somewhere up the ridge, and I sat there with the phone against my ear and the taped housing warm from the day's sun against my leg. The world tilted sideways, and for the first time in my life my brother's cruelty had a shape I could actually recognize, instead of just a weight I'd been carrying around without knowing what it was made of. Though I'm not Dad, I said eventually. The reserve I've got censors and isn't going bankrupt because of me. It's working, Jace. It actually worked. Though I know that now. Took me till tonight evidently and 4 whiskeys. A rough laugh, more like the old Jace but softer round the edges. For what it's worth, and I know it's not worth much, the word after 15 years of me being a complete prick about it. I hope you smash it. The world dough gives you the whole thing and Cormac's aluminum rubbish ends up in a skip somewhere. It's ugly tape and cracked plastic, Jace.
You said it yourself, trash.
Yeah, well. A pause. The world tilted sideways and I could hear him deciding whether to actually say the next part. Turns out ugly tape holds up better in the rain than anything I've ever built, hasn't it? The world tilted later I was back in that same Auckland boardroom, same lawyer, same 7-figure number on the page. The word this time the plastic housings sitting beside the contract wasn't an accident of habit. I'd carried it in on purpose, set it down deliberately next to the pen, because Anahara had asked. The world tilted sideways joking whether I was going to retire it now that I could afford something that looked less like a ransom note. The world tilted's unit had been quietly withdrawn from the tender a fortnight earlier once the third fogging failure made the papers DO circulated internally I heard secondhand. The world so he'd tried blaming a supplier for the seal quality, which nobody at DO seemed particularly interested in hearing. I didn't gloat, I didn't need to. The world tilted sideways. Data did the only talking that mattered. A 2-year field record with 0 missed incursions against a shiny prototype that couldn't survive a Fiordland front. The world tilted sideways. There's a particular kind of quiet that comes with being right and not having to say so. And I sat with that quiet the whole time I signed my name. Jace came to the little gathering afterwards at Mum's. The world tilted sideways, though he stood at the edge of it for the first 20 minutes with a beer he barely touched, watching me get congratulated by people who'd laughed at me for a decade, saying nothing. The world tilted sideways him counted as restraint. Eventually he wandered over while I was crouched by the chili bin, and instead of a joke, he crouched down next to me and asked, "The world who actually happens to the old unit now? The Deke 1, the flashy new build. Does the original just sit in a drawer? Might put it on a shelf in the new office. Somewhere I can see it. Bit sentimental for you." The world tilted sideways. I looked at him properly, then my brother in his good jacket at our mother's barbecue, no audience left to perform for. The world tilted sideways. His face had gone plain and unguarded in a way I hadn't seen since we were kids ourselves, before either of us had learned what our family's silences cost. The world that could have just told me about Dad years ago, you know. Instead of all that, "I know," he said, and didn't try to make it sound better than it was. I didn't have the words for it back then.
Don't really, just whiskey.
The world tilted Saiva didn't hug me. That's not us and it never will be, and I wouldn't have believed it if it had happened that neatly. What he did 3 days later. The words leave a small folded note tucked under the windscreen wiper of my ute outside Mum's. No card, no signature needed because I knew the handwriting. A single line, practical, almost gruff. The wormy to check the tape seal on the old housing before the wet season set in properly this year. The world Tilly insulation tape perishes after enough seasons in the rain, and he didn't want me losing 2 years of data over something that's stupid. The world tilted the note. It's in the top drawer of the desk in my new office out past Manapouri, tucked under the same cracked, wrapped plastic lid that's sat on that shelf ever since. The where anyone walking in can see it before they see the framed contract, before they see anything else in the room. Most people who visit assume it's a mistake. The clutter nobody's got round to throwing out. I've stopped explaining it. Every autumn before the rain sets in I still peel back the old tape and wind on a fresh layer. The world tilted sideways, same 3 turns I've always done, and every year without fail, somewhere around the 2nd week of April, my phone buzzes with a text from my brother asking if I've done it yet. The world tilted sideways. I still think about the 4 seconds it took him to fling that housing across the lawn, 'cause that's roughly the same amount of time it took him on the phone that night with 4 whiskeys in him. The world tilted sideways to say the thing he'd been carrying since he was 17. 4 seconds to throw something away. 4 seconds to finally tell me why. I don't know what to do with that except notice it. The way you notice 2 numbers that shouldn't match up and somehow do. The world tilted sideways. People ask sometimes when they see the cracked lid sitting on the shelf next to the framed contract, whether I ever thought about swapping it out for something that actually looked like an achievement. The world tilted sideways, such as I did think about it, for about as long as it took to think the thought, before I remembered that the achievement was never the aluminium. It was never going to be a clean sealed, the world tilted sideways looking thing. It was always going to be the ugly bit of plastic that kept working when the expensive one didn't, because it had been built by someone who'd learned the hard way, exactly where the water gets in. The world tilted sideways. Jay still texts me every April, same week, sometimes the same day, sometimes a few days either side depending on when the first proper southerly rolls through Fiordland. Have you done the tape yet? The words, no punctuation, nothing more than that. And I've never once asked him why he remembers the date better than I do. The world tilted sideways, because I think I already know. It's the one appointment in the whole year where he gets to check that I haven't ended up like our father without either of us having to say the word out loud. The world tilted away every year whether the message comes early or late. Peel back the old tape, wind on the new 3 turns, same as always. The world tiltin' finding that stoat and Robin rhythm on the bench the whole time without my telling it to. It's not a ritual I'd have chosen. The word handed me a clean sheet 9 years ago and asked me to design one. But then I didn't choose the crack either, or the tape, or the brother. I just got all 3. And somewhere along the way they became the same thing. Anahara still runs her 40 hectares behind Manapouri. 2 more chicks fledged off that same nest last season. The world tiltin' somewhere in a drawer at my desk, under the plastic lid there's a folded scrap of paper in my brother's handwriting that says nothing about forgiveness and nothing about the past. The world tilted sideways, just 4 words about weatherproofing, 'cause that was as close as either of us ever needed to get to saying it properly.